September 26th, a little after 6 p.m. And checking in on the field right now. Over here, brassicas of various sorts are starting to kind of pop up through all this chopped up mulch. Took the lawnmower to this patch, and this is what came out. So this one's still a little young. I know what you're thinking. It's kind of late in the season, but I have some ideas for how to get these pumped up as possible before it gets too cold. But we'll see. Daikon here coming up. 1 or 2 true leaves on these, and yeah, those look to be off to the races. I'm not too concerned about them from here on out. So those are doing good. Pumpkin patch, squash patch, things are still kind of coming and going. This is an interesting phase. You can see even within same plant there are dead and alive leaves, new leaves starting to pop up where old ones died back. So good to see the cycle of life taking place there, and just, you know, new things being allowed to kind of pop up in the gaps. I've been trying to sow as much as I can in this area, but it's a little tricky because stuff just doesn't really hit the soil very easily. And that's a good thing for the health of the soil. But yeah, you have to resort to other measures if you are trying to plant new stuff into them. Okra starting to show a little bit of signs of not liking the weather. Plenty of mature pods, as well as some edible ones on the top there if we want them. Okra, you know, it's the sort of thing, sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. And there doesn't seem to be much problem with leaving kind of old ones on to get big for seed, and it'll still make new ones, it seems like. With some plants, that's a little bit of a problem. If you don't keep them picked, they will stop producing. Okay, over here, Chinese cabbage, Grex. And yeah, everything looks cool. Lots of growth. It's on what, their third true leaf, some of them. Some tomatoes, you can see them sort of dropping as bombs there. Those, of course, will not make it, but that's one way of eliminating some of the tomato seed in your garden, if you've got it, is just trick them into germinating at the wrong time. Not really planned, but hey, if it plants, that's cool. It's 10:45 a.m. on the last day of September 30th. Tomorrow it will be October. Not that the names of the months really matter. Do keep in mind that the names of the months are kind of arbitrary, and sort of when they fall. You do kind of want to just think in terms of general seasons. But this is one of my favorite seasons right now. Early fall, I guess you could say. We're still, I think, quite a ways away from hard frost. And then also, I mean, not just hard frost. The thing that I'm most worried about at this point is when it's going to get cold enough to kill off the brassicas. In particular, things like daikon radish, hakusai, or Chinese cabbage. Those are two that I'm really trying to get going with breeding. And so what happens. That's what I'm prepared for. There's strength in diversity, and I think really cool stuff is on the horizon as I continue to sort of tune in my system. Working with nature, with the weeds. The weeds are allowed to be there. Where we're going, there's no sort of fertility issues, no lack of fertility, and so that's not really a problem in terms of weeds stealing your fertilizer. Weeds can be cut down and sort of returned to the earth, but what we're talking about, the other thing weeds I think do is keep your food plants in a state of competition and a little bit of stress. A little bit of stress or excitement is good. We are sort of starting from mu, or nothingness, with this. You are sort of getting something out of nothing by breeding for traits that are pretty abstract. These are traits that are not going to be very specifically, you're not going to find a gene for a lot of these things, because they are things that are expressed in some other way. So it's sort of like asking, it's like in the script of a movie, does the word clown exist? Say, and it could be any word, right? Any word, that you're thinking of, does it exist? Right? Whether a movie has the word clown in it or not is of very little importance to how the movie sort of hits you psychologically, right? And that is sort of the point of a movie, or a story, is to kind of take you somewhere else, right? Invoke the imagination. So we're breeding for abstract things, things that are going to be a little bit more difficult you wouldn't even know where to begin to determine how to breed for example, corn that can grow without being pushed into the soil. Corn that can be thrown on the ground, maybe walked on a little, and then come up and grow well, right? We're saying these are the conditions we want to breed for, and in theory, there is some genetic version of corn that will excel at doing this, right? We've seen plants pushed to their sort of genetic extremes, in all sorts of other ways, in terms of our plant breeding. But God bless the original, and I think most sophisticated plant breeders, which is the original American, the Native American plant breeders, who gave us something like 90% of the calories that we get today come from these sort of new world crops. And I like to think about and imagine what sorts of stories they told themselves, or what sort of what their version of science was that got them to where they were. breeding wise. You know, here I have teosinte to my left. This is what corn comes from. And how this got to corn, I've been watching this grow. I planted this, I think, kind of late actually, in July, and it's a photo period plant, so I think that it's just now starting to flower, and we'll see if I actually get anything seeds wise before first frost. I think it's gonna make it, but it might be a little tight on some of them. But hey, that's selection for you. This is, you know, these plants are hopefully gonna have some sort of memory of that. How that happens, you know, if it's genetics or epigenetics or whatever, we don't need to know, because all you really need to see is that the results speak for themselves, and that you want to consider this a process of tuning, right? And I think that it's not a wild assumption to say that, you know, if you want to grow something in a particular place, you might need to tune the genetics. You're gonna get some benefit from, above all else, tuning the genetics to work well in your area. And you know, I like putting down fertilizer. I don't know, it just but I acknowledge that it is basically unnecessary. I think if I'm returning the organic material to the field, I think it's, you know, a net plus. How that happens, we don't really need to know, but it does seem to be true that if you are returning all the organic material that you use, I guess in Fukuoka's case, let's address kind of a taboo issue here, which is that he was an advocate of the use of human manure, and said that it was a gift from Buddha, I think is how I'm remembering the quote. And so it's there for the using. I'm saying you can get by with basically the same thing, even just, you know, taking your food scraps and doing JLF would be sufficient. But I mean, if we acknowledge that we live in a world in which, you know, this free thing from Buddha, this thing, you know, all other creatures on Earth shit in the woods, you know, and the woods are thankful for it, right? So that's, I don't know. It's such a controversial topic, though. The fact that people are sort of unable to engage, even just like unable to engage in the idea that like we're doing the wrong thing with our poop currently. To me, I don't know. It's kind of frustrating when people are like, for example, you know, there's a certain percentage of the population that's just not ever like this is if there was a composting toilet, they would never use it. You know, or even, you know, talking to my students, I said something like, could you live in a world without air conditioning? And most people are like, no, like that's literally not, it's like a deal breaker. Like I will not, the earth is just going to have to go up in flames if that's how it's going to go, you know, like, you know, and these are I very idealistic, you know, otherwise I think very empathetic, highly empathetic people. I think that, you know, young people are more empathetic than they've ever been. But these sorts of things, it's like, you know, culturally, yeah, we're just not able to accept that certain things as like, no, like not every convenience that we enjoy now is going to be able to continue in its current form. That's something that nobody, like a politician would get, crucified for saying that. The idea that there's going to be any less of anything we currently have in the future is insane. That's insane. It's crazy that you can't say that. But so I guess, yeah, the fundamental question that you sort of are trying to answer in living well as a human and staying in one place. I guess if we're making those two, if you stop hunting and gathering and start staying in one place, then you're going to have some kind of agriculture. And at the end of the day, the most simple question we can be asking is how, in this space of land, if we all agree to use it, can we get the most nutrition and beauty, get the most of whatever it is that we need, right? And one thing that we need is nutritious food. How can we get the most out of this with the least amount of toil? And I think that toil, it's really important that, any sort of system should consider that at the end point, there's going to be someone eating your food, right? In our case, and there's going to be people, working. And both of these things should be as joyous and as much of a benefit to humanity as possible. And so I think that this sort of mindset could be very beneficial to the way that people approach life in the world. And I think that it will succeed because it's just interesting. I think it's the sort of thing that captures the human imagination. It allows you to use your imagination. This is the intersection of science and sort of, we're saying there's a lot about science that we don't understand. You have to acknowledge at any step of the way that it's infinitely more complex than we can observe at any given moment, no matter how sophisticated, because there will always just be new weird things that we don't understand popping up all the time. But that's okay. And that's, what's fun about being alive. And it's what's also, this is what makes us human, our ability to kind of explore and think up new ways of being is fundamentally what we do. And so I think that with a little positivity and sort of prayer in our hearts to the work that we're doing, that it be good for humanity and to the benefit of humanity, right? And how good it must, I think that it has to be able to feel to somebody who is able to, know that they're at that intersection of doing good work, of knowing that the food that you eat is healthy, and know that the work that you're doing is to the benefit of humanity. So, yeah, I think it's a good analogy into also sort of how to approach science going forward. with a little bit more kind of curiosity and sort of playfulness, perhaps. This is, a new sort of turning point for humanity. But if you think about something kind of similar to what a food forest is, what Fukuoka advocates for, combining that with really good seed saving and sort of gently pushing nature generation after generation towards certain goals with your breeding, population breeding. I think population breeding is the future. Line breeding, Mendelian breeding is just going to be, I think, too slow for what we're up against. This is just my hypothesis, So I think that a lot of the GMO, not GMO thing is also going to kind of, that's a debate that will fade in time. I think that specific genes, we're sort of not really acknowledging that there's, what we're manipulating are sort of mere words in the script of a giant movie script or something like that, right? As to use an analogy. But if people are really sort of coordinated in moving towards regreening the earth, I think that it could really happen. This is going to be, I think, a big part of it is going to be pushing genetics, using population breeding towards even more daring ends, but that gradually and actually not so gradually, pretty quickly, you can go from something not working to something working if you are sort of standing at the edge of sort of what conventional science knows about genetics, and then what we can sort of pull off when we consider genetics in the abstract term. And so I guess that's this, these are not sort of yes or no traits, these are more or less traits. And in theory, I guess you can breed for these sort of more or less things. For any sort of, I guess, human observable trait, as far as I understand things. So sort of the sky's the limit in terms of what we can bring things to do, and I think that does sort of offer some hope, some sort of way of uniting, young people, a sort of new food renaissance as well. Think about how much more exciting eating would be if you knew that food was across the board more nutritious, and that you could go to some locally owned restaurant that's serving food that can only really grow where you are, right? Or that we've selected for the most delicious version of X, Y, and Z. These are human traits. We are literally, if you tasting everything you save seed for, being honest with yourselves, but also just talking among friends. How does this taste? I'm excited to do some taste trials coming up here with my wife on a few things. be like, how does this taste to you? How does this taste to you? And that, what we end up getting, I think, will be a very special thing, because that's going to be then, after maybe a couple rounds, something very, specific and something tailored to what we're growing here. And Fukuoka very specifically says at one point in one of his books that only food grown basically in this way can also be medicine. So by this way, he meant wild, basically semi-wild in, so take for example daikon that he had growing in his field. That was daikon that had just gone to seed. The seed falls, right? Not harvested. So he doesn't get into specifics. He doesn't say save seed and then spread the seed. He says you can do this just by letting things reseed themselves. But that he had hybrid radishes, or radishes that had started pollinating amongst themselves, and he would throw out just whatever varieties. I wonder if his brassicas had CMS. Anyway, in his sort of food forest, this was basically, he said, food grown this way can act as medicine. And that's basically, I get my point being, everything growing in his food forest was probably, by that point, also a land race. So stuff that is just dropping seed from the plant itself. And so I guess that would be sort of maybe something that I would want to consider going forward, is just then taking the next step of saying, well, yeah, don't even reseed yourself. And I think at a certain scale, if I had maybe a little bit more space, I think I could do that, And so that means then leaving some of the seeds, leaving, a moshada like this, or one of these. That means leaving that out in the field and not harvesting seed from it. Because harvesting seed is, on some level, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but it's better than weeding. And so you're sort of changing the task that you do. But I think that there's some pretty simple and elegant ways of saving seed for stuff. I mean, with a butternut squash, or with squash and stuff like that, where the seed is inside, you're pretty much good to go. There's not that much else you need to be trying to do. Those seeds, it's easy. The ones that take a little bit of work are, the brassicas. You let them dry down, and you can be as lazy or as precise as you want to be. But at the end of the day, it's interesting to see what you don't even have to sort of reseed, what freely drops its own seed. Weeds, they seem to be good at that. So if you're allowed to select for anything, you might as well select for that. For a plant's ability to reseed itself. And natural selection takes care of a lot of that for you. And you will have questions that you didn't even know you were asking answered for you. Here's something interesting. Maybe some kind of animal was trying to get into these okra pods. So there's some okra seeds there. Very cool. So, in short, I would like to say that population breeding, landrace breeding, whatever we're going to end up calling it, in theory, it seems like you can select for any observable trait. The ability to do X, Y, and Z. And so by that measure, it does seem possible to really, tune in an agricultural system to be one that does what you want when you want it. And that then you can sort of spend the rest of your time hanging out looking at it like I do. Right, so, I say this is good exercise, but honestly, there's not that much that I'm doing. Other than maybe, carting around water sometimes. But that really, it's nice to just be able to stand up straight, look at things, just kind of zone out, hang with your thoughts. Think about how humans can live kindly with nature by flexing what might be our strongest muscle, our brain. I don't mean that literally. Don't be in the comments like it's not a strong muscle. It's not a muscle, let alone a strong one. Anyway, I think it's going to be okay.